everybody. Hi. Everyone's having a good time at the Slow Living Summit? Yeah? How many people are here for the first time? Nice. How many people are in Brattleboro, Vermont for the first time? All right, welcome. Excellent. So I've been having a really great time getting to know folks during these 2 days. I feel like, it's my buddies. I'm seeing so many familiar faces. This is really great. And I feel really honored to be able to work with this panel of amazing people who are doing really, really important things, working in a really tough industry, right? The food industry is one of the toughest in all of the industries to get started in. I'm sure they can tell you a little bit about that too. We're dealing with perishables, we're dealing with service, production, live right now. It's not like, oh, I'll put it on eBay and sell it next month. It has to be done now, and if it's not done now, then it's gone, right? And that's money in and out the door. So yeah, really tough industry, but important, right? We eat every single day. So I wanted to frame this, and then I'm going to step down and let folks take over, and then I'm going to let you take over. Okay, so the format that we'll be doing, we have an article here I want to just briefly introduce to you. It's written by a well-known academic who has a best-selling book looking at how do you do well and do good. Okay, we'll take a look at how she defines that. Then we're going to learn a little more about who our panelists are. Then I'm going to send the class out to you guys. And you'll be able to work in small groups, come up with a couple of questions for the panelists so that we're talking about things that are meaningful to you. Okay, this is a great opportunity that we have such wonderful experts here that are going to really be able to answer a lot of questions. We'll put the questions up there, and then we'll sit back and let them run their magic. Sound good? Mm-hmm. Anyone have questions? All right, so some of you have this article, right, How to Do Well and Do Good, and I know you haven't had a chance to really read it yet, but sometime you will. And basically, what Professor Moss Cantor, and she's a professor at Harvard, is talking about is how corporations are really benefiting through this idea of social entrepreneurship. And some of her examples are Starbucks, right? Starbucks is able to add a little bit of fair trade coffee to all of the other coffees that they're selling. And she's showing that as an example of how, businesses are really doing good and it's benefiting them, right? By doing good, supporting a little bit of fair trade, and then it makes the customers feel a little better about going to Starbucks. Of course, the fair trade coffee that you get at Starbucks is only the one that's packaged and sold in some stores, but anything that's brewed is not fair trade. That costs a little bit more money to get fair trade coffee. And even though Starbucks will charge, a nice price for that coffee, they don't charge enough to cover what they think they need to buy fair trade coffee for all of their coffee, okay? But she doesn't catch that, right? She just catches, fair trade's good, and, they're out there being part of that scene, and customers like it, right? She also talks about Procter & Gamble and how they spent some time living with underprivileged families in Brazil to really get to know those households better. And from that experience, they were able to develop a laundry soap that was more affordable and really worked in an environment where people didn't have washing machines. So she put that in as an example of doing good and doing well, okay? Which I guess you could say, yeah, but it was also a nice, marketing move on their end, just understanding their audience a little bit better. Some of the other things that she looks at here is some of the benefits of having this kind of strategy is to strengthen your company. Right, you're creating a common focus and value, especially if you have a large international company, right? Everyone can be on that same page of doing good and doing well. And it also fosters innovation, which I'm sure you guys have been learning a lot about innovative ideas in this conference. So sort of an interesting take on this idea of how to do good and do well. I know our folks here also have different ways that they're addressing that as well. I'm going to turn that over, let you guys introduce yourselves. We have Kevin Cleary is here from the Vermont Wine School. Stephanie Bonin from Duo Restaurant. How many of us have eaten at Duo's already? Nice, okay, right down the corner on Main Street. We have Richard French from The Works. Anyone go there to eat? I had my coffee there this afternoon. Yeah. And my daughter and I, we do work with quinoa in Bolivia, and we have our photo exhibitors there right now. So those Andean photos, we took them. And then we have Joanna Benoit, who's up from Massachusetts from the Franklin County Community Development Club. And we actually worked together on a project with the community college last fall, helping to get the word out about the awesome things going on at the FDCC. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Each of you can introduce what you're doing, what's inspiring, motivating you, how are you doing well and doing good, maybe a little different than Starbucks and Procter & Gamble. So how about,
my name's Kevin Cleary, and I own the Vermont Wine School, so we're here talking about restaurants. So just a little confession, I'm a retired kind of restaurateur. I had a restaurant for about 20 years. I've been in the business, I was in the business for, about 25 years in the restaurant business as a chef. I was lucky enough, when I got out of culinary school here in Vermont, I went to New England Culinary up in Essex. I was lucky enough to get a great internship in Boston, and the chef at the time said, don't go back to school, I will send you to Italy. So I said, Vermont, Tuscany, yeah, it's close, but Italy won out at the time. So I spent 5 months in Italy, and I think there it really shaped how I was going to go forward as a chef and as a cook. Because, here we talk about locavore, and there, I mean, it's been like that for forever. I mean, I went to the farms, I went foraging with the chefs. I was lucky I got two really, really great chefs, a Michelin-starred restaurant and a very, very small restaurant, where I was able to do just about everything that everybody was doing. So that really kind of shaped what I thought how restaurants should be. And then, once again, I was lucky enough, and I got kind of my dream job when I came back in Boston at a restaurant called Il Capriccio, which is right outside of Boston, which is still there. 33 years they've been open. And yeah, I know, it's crazy, right? And it was a farm to table, and this is back in '97, before people were even talking about that. We had a farmer in Lincoln who grew anything we wanted. We were getting whole animals from Vermont. And I just thought that was normal, because it was the way it was in Italy. And then I'm coming back, and it was an Italian restaurant, Il Capriccio, and they went to Italy quite often. And we were just doing the right things, without even thinking about it. And then they sent me to a slow food event, and this is '97. So I went to the first annual cheese festival in Bra, Italy, and that was another defining moment, because it was just amazing that you didn't know everything about slow food. People know about slow food, right? So there was no chapter here called Conviviums at the time. I'm not sure if they're still called Conviviums or chapters. So when I came back, I wanted to start one, and I hooked up with a guy from Cambridge, and we tried, and it was just really hard. And then I was in the process of leaving Il Capriccio and opening my own restaurant up in Gloucester, Mass. So that kind of fell by the wayside, but I never, I always still talk about that weekend that I spent there. And I opened up a restaurant. Once again, I just was doing the things I thought everybody was doing at the time. I was walking around the corner to get my fish, because I was in Gloucester. Day boat fish, sustainable, lobsters, everything. We sold that place in 2003, and then we moved up to Burlington. So we just kind of moved the restaurant up to Burlington. And once again, I made some connections. I was one of the first to start using produce from the Intervale with Half Pint Farms. And just local whole animals from Vermont Quality Meats, who have been, I think they're now with Black River, I'm not sure. But once again, just kind of doing the things I thought everybody was doing, and I found out that not everybody's doing those things. And even up here, people weren't doing those things. So I think that's what we talk about when we talk about doing good, anyway. It's just supporting the local farmers, supporting, and if you support them, it just kind of trickles on down the line, I think, and I hope anyway. And that's, where I was coming from. Like I said, I sold a restaurant in 2015. So we've been in business for about 18 years. And now I'm just teaching wine classes, but I'm still trying to do the right thing and do good. So that's my story.
And how are your wine classes a little different from other wine classes, right? I hear you talking about your restaurants. They keep being a little different.
Yeah, well, I started the wine school. I got hooked on wine in 2003. Well, actually, way back at Il Capriccio, I was a beer drinker, and they were and still are known as one of the best Italian wine lists in the country. And one night, the owner, Jeannie, said, "What are you doing drinking beer?" Here, boom. And she gave me a glass of wine from the Piedmont, Barolo. And the epiphany moment, has anybody ever had it with wine or food? That was it, right there. And then it just kind of snowballed, so I started taking classes. And now I'm teaching wine classes. And I'm actually going to start next month working for a distributor buying wine. So I'll be their fine wine buyer. And it's kind of the same thing. We talked about this morning. There were some people here that were on the panel this morning that I was on with Alan from it. But it's about finding those small producers that are doing the right things. And we just had a conversation about prosciutto and Parmesan. If anybody's ever been over there, and you can go to these, they're factories. They're making the product, but it's a little different than the artisanal product that's out there. And wine is kind of the same way. A lot of wine is manufactured. So I try to concentrate on small producers who are doing the right thing, biodynamic, sustainable farming, very little added, maybe just a little bit of sulfur, if you want to call them natural wines. It's a big buzzword right now. But, and the more I talk about those wines and the more I buy for this distributor eventually, the more they're going to be out there. And once again, it just kind of all trickles down. We talked this morning about vodka, spirits brands, and about how 75% is owned by 5 companies or 2 companies. And there's a lot of craft spirits out there, and if we all would just start drinking craft spirits and all the others would go away, I think that would probably be a generational thing, but it's true. It has to start somewhere, so.
Nice. Stephanie.
So, some similarities. So, June in Vermont, as a 9-year-old, I would right now be taking a really beautiful, hot, bubbling, homemade rhubarb pie that my mom made to the spring fling. Every year, at the end of the year, we would do this fundraiser called Spring Fling, and every year I would present this rhubarb pie from the rhubarb from my garden, or I would be, taking the tendrils of dill for the potato salad. And like Kevin, there wasn't any, this is this really novel thing that we're doing. It was what it was. And so seasonal eating and farm to table wasn't a fad. It was really in my DNA and in my blood. And so when I opened up a restaurant, there wasn't a question or a discussion. It was that this is what we would do. And so I went to the Thursday morning talk with Raj about conscious capitalism. And so I can now say that I'm a founder and a leader of a conscious capitalism business. And what he defined that as meaning is that a business that has a higher mission. So I started thinking about that, and I thought, the normal stereotype is a business's mission is to make money. And Duo Restaurant's mission is to provide a farm-to-table dining experience while creating community. And so, voila, I now have a new label to myself, thanks to Raj. When we say farm-to-table, it is not hitting the easy button. A restaurant can easily pick up a phone call, and with one phone call get all paper products, all cleaning products, all food, everything. And what that means is that they can get everything they need, they can have it delivered at one delivery point, they can get one invoice, they can write one check. And what we do is probably 20 to 30 phone calls within the week. And so that means 20 to 30 deliveries that you're orchestrating, 20 to 30 invoices, 20 to 30 checks, 20 to 30 stamps, envelopes, and on and on. And the thing is that when you have a farm to table restaurant, then it's a given that you're a seasonal restaurant. So instead of having a menu that's the same all year long, you're having menus change all the time, which on the face is lovely and wonderful. But what that means is that all year long, we're having discussions about menus, we're tasting menus, we're designing menus, what are they going to say? We're printing menus, we're sourcing ingredients, we're training the line cooks, we're training the front of the house staff, we're marketing the new menu, then we're serving the new menu. And time to make the donuts, you do it again. And again, because you want to be seasonal. So there's only one reason why well, that's not true, but why do you do it? Because when it's going really well, it feels so good. What you are walking around that dining room and feeling is a true extension of who you are and the values that you are, and you're putting that out to the world. And so I definitely wouldn't give that up. And the community, you know, one example of that community that we're creating, when we first opened our restaurant in Denver 12 years ago, we were having to prove to ourselves, to the farmers, not to ourselves, to the farmers, that we could be great customers. So that meant going to the farmers market and picking up their produce. It meant paying cash. And over time, then we gained trust and we would be invoiced for it. It meant that we got to do cross-marketing and talk about each other on social media. It meant that we got to shed light on them, spotlighting them for farmers' dinners. Again, all these sort of symbiotic things, but all along the way forming that community and that relationship. And so now, 12 years later, where we are as a restaurant and where the farmers are in such a different place than we were when we started. And seeing that community be formed has been really wonderful.
Yeah, so my name is Joanna Benoit. I am the Food Business Development Specialist for the Franklin County Community Development Corporation, where we have the Western Massachusetts Food Processing Center. So just take a second to let that all hit you. So we are essentially a economic development nonprofit based down in Greenfield, Massachusetts. Founded about 40 years as a response to basically a declining economy in a very rural part of Massachusetts. There was a lot of manufacturing jobs, there was a lot of, industrial work in Franklin County. Suddenly it was leaving. And so the Franklin County CDC kind of came up to kind of take a little bit of control over that. About 16 years ago, we opened up the Western Mass Food Processing Center. Essentially what that is we call ourselves an incubator kitchen. And so we work with food producers on all different levels, from trying to convert a recipe from the back of a napkin to somebody who has been doing canning in their kitchen for their whole life, and we work with them to kind of get it to a commercial scale. And one of the great values of this is that means that we are investing in the equipment. Infrastructure is a huge cost for food businesses and restaurants, I'm sure. But we have kettles where we have 200-gallon kettles, and one kettle might cost $20,000. And if you're a beginning food business, that's really intimidating on top of everything else you have to go through to develop your value-added product or figure out your marketing and your labels. And so we're there as you can dip your toe in the food processing world. You can make sure it's right for you without actually putting yourself $1 million in the hole. Another great thing about the Food Processing Center, which I see, is kind of this kind of organic mentorship that happens between food businesses, and even with us, we might have a new producer that comes in with a question that maybe myself or my colleague doesn't know how to answer, but one of our producers might be able to answer it through their experiences with either marketing or with actually producing. So it's just, I think it's just a great resource to have. Also in the Pioneer Valley where we're located, we're deeply rooted in agriculture, which is another reason why we invested in this food processing center. We have very rich soils. It's basically the root of our economy is agriculture out in the Pioneer Valley. And so this food processing center is also a way for farmers to utilize a commercial space to do value-added processing. And kind of going back to what you were saying about how when you're doing food, there's always a shelf life. And with value-added processing, what we're doing is kind of extending that shelf life. And so instead of selling blueberries, maybe instead you're developing blueberry jam. And so now your blueberries, when they're fresh, they'll last 2 weeks. Now you have blueberries that can actually sit in a shelf. They're preserved. You can maybe now sell them in the winter. So that gives the farmer a longer access to the market, especially in New England when we have, 2, 3, 4, 5 months, not a whole lot of growing season up here. What it really does is allows that farmer to continue going to winter farmers markets, to maybe think about institutional sales, to really expand their access and their marketing capacity. Something else we do with the Food Processing Center is about 2-3 years ago, we purchased an individual quick frozen machine, which is a liquid nitrogen freezing tunnel. So to even help further farmers a little bit further, we decided that every business that comes through the food processing center, that business is owned by the producer. However, with the IQF machine, what we do is we as a business, the food processing center, we buy in produce from farmers. We'll lightly process it, we'll freeze it, and then we'll turn around and try and sell that to institutions in the winter. So again, that's giving farmers access to a market option that wasn't necessarily available to them before. And it's also kind of solving that big question mark of how do you procure local food that's not root vegetables, that's not potatoes and not, lots of beets forever in the dead of winter. So by freezing food, you're kind of doing a lightly processed value added, but again, you're extending that shelf life, you're making it easy for, a little bit more menu diversity in the dead of the winter. And one thing that's really core to what we do, which I think kind of plays into the do good and do well, is, we see, I've heard a lot today while I've been here, is we're seeing this trend towards local in our area. And we're seeing this trend towards consumers really valuing stories and value-based businesses. You see people buying more based on the values behind why people are doing what they're doing, whether they're supporting local agriculture or fair wages or organic production. People really want to hear that story. And so what we try and do at the CDC is we try to kind of foster an effective way to tell that story, making sure you're well versed in the values behind what you're doing, but also pairing that with effective planning. Business planning and market planning, knowing how and where you're selling your goods as a seller, kind of combining that with making sure you're telling your story the right way and planning appropriately, that gives you more of a chance for success. And that's kind of why I love what I do.
One-stop shopping there, huh? Now, can you give us a brief example of some of the companies maybe that you've been working with? Perhaps there's some brands that we might know, or?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. We work with, let me think about people who might be known up here. Yummy might be up here. She's a sweet potato salsa company. One of our most exciting ones, I think, right now is Kitchen Garden Sriracha. They're a locally made sriracha sauce. So they have this vertically integrated their whole process. So they grow the peppers, they were farm first, they grow these amazing hot peppers, and they bring them to us and process them in our facility and create this incredible sriracha sauce. And they also do a tomatillo salsa on top of that as well. And they just found a niche for themselves. They really did. People love hot sauce. They really do. I do too. And by creating this local, organic, like family farm-based sriracha sauce, they just really found a market for themselves. And recently won a Good Food Award in San Francisco. So they're kicking butt.
Cool.
Yeah.
And a lot of your distribution goes through Whole Foods and other grocery commercial chains.
Some of them, yeah. So our producers, we are always there as a mentor to advise people on how and what has been successful in the past, but ultimately it's up to our producers to decide how they market their product and where it goes. And so we always give advice based on success, but we don't ever want to be kind of hands-on. So we train people on how to make those decisions and guide their own process.
Cool. All right, and Richard, you want to tell us about your work?
Yep. So I'm Richard. I founded the Works Bakery Cafes in 1988, so it's quite a while ago. And when we started in '88, Ben & Jerry's was pretty hot, and I was living in Burlington, Vermont, and watching free movies on the top of the garage, the parking garage, and The Yellow Submarine was like the big movie that summer. So just to kind of put context about how long I've been doing it, it's 29 years. Back then, the big thing that was coming out was what was called the dual bottom line. It's now triple bottom line, so it's expanded. And so locally sourced food wasn't really a buzzword or a trend, anything like that yet. It was just more starting a company that had a conscience. So from day one, we wanted to be that. And again, Ben & Jerry's was our idol company to be emulating. We did do some sourcing pretty much from day one locally. Cream cheese and dairy products were our best go-to because we have a lot of cows around here. So we started using Cabot cheddar cheese back in the 80s, and our cream cheese was coming from Franklin County, Enosburg Falls, Franklin Franklin Foods, it's called Hans cream cheese. And we were really buying it then because it tasted the best, and we were kind of really into our Vermont roots, and we thought it made sense to be supporting local agriculture. Again, even though it wasn't easy to do back then. Our tagline years later became Eat Well, Feel Good, so it's sort of appropriate that I'm here speaking about do good and do well. But we really called our food thoughtfully sourced food, not necessarily locally sourced food, because when it first started coming out as a movement, it was somewhat squishy in terms of, well, what's local? Is that local, like, you know, Windham County, or is that 30 miles, or is that 60 miles, or 300 miles? And what happens if you're in Berlin and you know, you're buying stuff from Canada? And so there was all this kind of like unknown yet, like anything when it's new and needs to be defined, whether it was organic 30 years ago, Ted, when they were trying to figure out what organic meant or what natural means or any of these other buzzwords. So again, what I'd say that we predominantly serve at the Works Cafes is thoughtfully sourced food, and I'll sort of give a couple examples of successes and a couple examples of failures that we've had in trying to have thoughtfully sourced food. So a couple of successes and some that drove me from lunch yesterday, so I'm going to bore you with repeating some stories, but probably one of our best success stories is eggs. We use a lot of eggs. We serve a lot of breakfast. And probably more than a decade ago or so, we were trying to figure out how to get local eggs and get them year-round. And we went to Pete and Jerry's, which wasn't where they were now. They hadn't grown quite that large. And it was a good example of where we were trying to figure out how we wanted to try to source more annually, and how a producer was struggling with some of their products. So Pete and Jerry's back then really had a tough market for small and medium eggs, because Americans like large and extra large and everything else. But you know, the chickens, you know, we get small eggs and medium eggs and a lot of extra large eggs. So it took us about 6 months to put together a program with Pete and Jerry's where we were buying their small and medium eggs, and we were shipping them across the state. Yesterday we were able to dig in a little bit further about footprint and carbon footprint and whether that really makes sense or not to have these eggs processed. So all of our eggs at all the Works Cafes now for about a decade have been processed for us with a processing facility out of New Hampshire called Taylor Farm. They're one of the last kind of independently owned, smaller egg processing facilities in the Northeast. So there was an example where we were able to figure out what Pete and Jerry's was having a difficult time marketing, selling, and yet they had a lot of them, small and medium eggs, and then how we could get them to work for us, because we could have a busy Saturday morning where we're cracking 400 eggs, and it was just becoming really labor intensive to crack that many eggs and keep the shells out of the egg sandwich or anything else like that. So that was probably one good success story. Kind of proud of that. We didn't commit to buying just their organic eggs, though, because we couldn't afford that. We were buying. They have another line called Nellie's eggs, and so we were willing to buy both Pete and Jerry's line and Nellie's line, and so we say that we use Nellie's eggs because they're not organic. A lot of them in there are the Pete and Jerry's eggs that are organic, but it would probably cost us about a 20% premium to move up to sorting those eggs when they come in to being the organic certified Pete and Jerry's eggs. So eggs was a pretty good example of success. Tomatoes recently has been a fairly okay example of success. We're buying our tomatoes from a year-round hydroponic facility in Maine, not local, but certainly regional, called Backyard Tomatoes. And again, and I'll sort of give real examples. We only buy their drops because it's really all that we can afford. One of my board members is here, and so I want to make sure that I'm focused. You know, triple bottom line means that we need to make money, and I realize that if I'm not focused on that, and we're not being real sensitive to that, I can't be here talking, and I won't be a good example and be able to use a ton of lessons that we've learned that were hard knocks. So we buy our tomatoes year-round, the drops, from Backyard Tomato. We're fairly proud of it. It wasn't easy to do. yesterday we dug in a little bit deeper about hydroponics and whether that was good or bad. And in almost any story that I can talk about, if we dig a little bit deeper and turn over a stone, we could have spirited conversation. So examples I used about that yesterday were Cabot cheddar cheese, cooperatively owned, won a bunch of gold awards. I love their cheese. But when we looked at doing a project with Grafton cheddar cheese, which I think on certain levels has maybe some deeper roots or better mission right now in Windham County, we couldn't afford to do that project. It was going to cost us probably double what we pay in cheddar cheese, and we were already stepping up to be with Cabot than other purveyors that we had an opportunity to be working with that wouldn't have fit kind of a New England footprint, local or regionally sourced mantra. So we're in early stages of working with another large hydroponic year-round green grower that will grow all of our kale and our mesclun, and we're trying to get them to grow our spinach. They're struggling with that because the root system of spinach is a little bit more complex than the others. So here's examples. Are they good or bad? I'm not really sure. I'd love to be able to buy all of our vegetables from Paul Harlow, Westminster West here, and we've been buying some seasonally from Westminster Organics for a decade, but it's a really short growing season. And we've done some projects. If Orly were here, I would call her out. About 7 years ago, she encouraged me to take an initiative to do a sandwich sourced locally from bread to spread, we called it. And we were doing that. So whether it was the bread or the spread or the filling and the vegetables. And I realized that sandwich really needed to be a $12 sandwich if we were to really, we did do it. We lost our shirts trying to do it. And back to Stephanie, we drove our accounting department crazy because it was a gazillion different, not a gazillion, but at least more than 6 different invoices for one sandwich. They weren't automated at all, those invoices when they were coming in. So they were, one invoice that had dirt on it because it was written in the field or in the barn or whatever, and they may have forgotten to write that it was a case. It just said tomatoes on it and $25 or. So then the accounting department was trying to figure out, is this a case? Is this 25 pounds? And Richard, really, what is this? So trying to figure out how to thoughtfully source food and have it be scalable. So we run 8 cafes, I forgot about that, sprinkled around northern New England here, and have it be scalable's not been easy. And how to get our team, which aren't chefs and haven't been trained with knife handling skills or breaking down full animals, how to get them to be able to execute product that was changing often if we were trying to do that. So we do not update our menu often enough. I know that because it's tricky. I'm sort of being defensive. Tricky for us to do all the things that Stephanie spoke about: developing, marketing, costing, sourcing, making sure it sells once you've done all that. Because if you do all that and you pick the wrong item, then it's like, oh shoot. We have a great sandwich, but it just doesn't sell. 2 years ago, we were trying to do the Bernie sandwich, Field Burn, and we thought it was great, and we came out with it, but Bernie didn't make it, unfortunately, but also the sandwich didn't sell well. It had eggplant and some other vegetables that we were sourcing locally in the summertime. But so other quick examples. Of thoughtfully sourced, we've been buying from one farm in Costa Rica for more than a decade. So we have singly sourced coffee. Back to talking about coffee on the Starbucks. Proud of that. Nothing local about it at all. We're there because that one farm has a great mission with their staff and provides clean water and dental care for their staff, and they support the soccer team and a bunch of other, and some housing, and some of these sound like they're foreign to us up here, but in Costa Rica that was a pretty big deal. So I'm going to bring up just a couple of other things about doing good and doing well in case they spring up conversation when we move over. I think beyond food, we need to be thinking about where we're banking. I'm self-serving because I'm recently on the Brattleboro Savings and Loan Board, but where we put our money is really important, and where we borrow our money from is really, really important, because we want them to invest in our communities. How we build out our cafes or our restaurants is another way that we can use our money, whether it's using local tradespeople or craftsmen, or sourcing locally salvaged materials, wood or concrete countertops, or we have a bunch of examples about that. Or then how we treat our business beyond sourcing food, livable wage or not a livable wage, or what we're doing with all of the waste that we generate. The food business is the most energy intensive business, I believe, bar none. We generate a ton of trash. We have a lot of compressors and refrigeration and air conditioning and heating going year round. And we need to be sensitive about that. We need to figure out how to buy Energy Star equipment and LED lighting, and what we're doing with all that trash. So we did a compost project about 7 years ago that we're pretty proud about, but it took us a lot of time and energy, and it probably cost us no less than $20,000 a year to compost front of the house and back of the house. And we don't do a great job at it. And what I mean by that is most of our customers don't take the time to truly sort the way that we should be sorting. And so it's like, wow, I see the trash and know what it cost us, and when I see someone that didn't take the time to read the sign, and maybe they're not clear enough to keep whatever should be in the compost into the other. And we have two big hurdles to get over that. We need to move over to cutlery and to straws to be able to make it easier for people to sort, and that'll probably cost us another $8,000 to do that for our company. So, we're trying to manage that bottom line, and it's a triple bottom line. Do we provide a livable work wage, or are we sourcing locally? And it's not easy to do, and still to make money. And there are more and more pressures to do that every day now, because we all want to move faster, and we want to stretch our dollar, and I think all of us sometimes maybe aren't willing to pay what we need to pay to keep our environment and the restaurants in the world and our staff all working and all balancing right. So that's what I'd say.
Right. So lots of really cool things to be thinking about there, right? A lot more complex than just, adding some fair trade coffee to the menu, right? And so it's really good. So some of the things I'm really enjoying, and you're probably, connecting this also to other things you've been learning about these last 2 days, the idea of being able to help others, right? As you're building your own business, helping others to build their businesses as well. And I love the story about buying the eggs, the smaller eggs, right? The tomatoes that fell. And how that's such a win-win, because that's what we're always looking for, right? How do we create those win-wins? Because it's hard for those tomato farmers to sell those second tomatoes. And it's hard for a restaurant to pay premium prices for ingredients that are gonna be built into food where you're not gonna see, is it the perfect tomato or a slice of a tomato that was bruised on one part and that part wasn't used, right? So being able to create that market for those damaged tomatoes and creating a way for it to become affordable in a sandwich, right? So you're not getting a $16 sandwich. Okay? The idea of being able to take on that extra work, the complexities of sourcing so many different ingredients from different local places, right? And being flexible to their own ways of working to make it work for you and for them, right? So it's not easy, right? It's going more than just sending a focus group down to a slum in Brazil, right? We're going deeper here, and we're more connected with what we're working in. What I want to do now is the group has come up with a couple of questions for you that you might be interested in, such as how to avoid the $12 sandwich, or how to source annually and navigate the seasons. And we've heard a little bit about that already. What I want to do is make this, what we all want to do is make this relevant to you too. So I want to give you about 5 minutes to turn to the people next to you, okay? We can work with 3 people, 2 people, this whole little row can get together. Talk amongst yourselves, what's interesting, what kind of came out, what are you interested in knowing? After 5 minutes, I'm going to give you all a chance, each little group, let us know the questions, we'll write it down, and they'll start going through it. Sound good? So talk a little bit, what's Joe coming up, what's interesting?
When do you sleep?
All right, are we ready with questions? All right.
About the product.
Okay, good. So let's do the $12
Product that's not.
All right, let's hear other things we want to talk about. Going up there, we got the $12 sandwich, why not, right?
Yeah, that's exactly my question.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Because I'll forego my airplane ticket to eat a bunch of these $12 sandwiches, because I know that you're using 100% organic eggs instead of half organic eggs. On that demographic, does that exist? Am I the only one?
Please no.
Well, you're not the only one, but you're a small percentage, I think. You know that? I mean, I could be wrong, but.
All right, so let's keep going. So why not, right? What else do we have out there? Yes.
My question is also around the works with 8 different locations and scaling. Do you need to be able to source to serve all of those locations? Or can you be getting some stuff from a farm in Burlington and others from a farm in Brattleboro? Or does it need to be all kind of centralized?
Right, so scaling sustainably, right? Do we have economies of scale? Are we buying big shipments and sending them in all at once? Or are we buying more locally in each local community? How do we define that? Good. What else, Jim?
I'd like to know what the panelists look for in their vendors. So if you're sourcing to a farm, number one, how do they even contact you to try to sell to you? And number two, what do you look for in them? What do you look for to say, this would be the perfect local person for me to work with?
Nice, so,
What do they look for in your vendors? What do you look for in your vendors?
all right, that's,
Vetting the vendors. Vetting the vendors.
right, vetting the vendors, I knew there was a better way to say that, vetting the vendors. Right, do you buy local, do you buy organic, do you buy both, right? Is that helping, making the market inaccessible for local farmers that
Do you
can't
use
afford
computerized invoices?
the
It sounds like
organic
invoices that are just,
certification?
got dirt on them, don't really work.
Right, so are we creating opportunity, are we creating exclusivity, right? How are our choices being made and who are they impacting? What else? Yeah, Kristen.
Hold on. I just gotta raise my hand really quickly. Well, I guess my question was how much do the customers know, like how much do they want local food at the work specifically? And then kind of like with regards to that, it seems like the restaurant business, they are providing also an educational service, like educating people about food and food systems. And does the Works also take that on as their mission, I guess? And also like with regards to recycling and that kind of thing.
Right, so customer, right? How are we educating our customers? I have a fair trade company, and I always say like that was the burden, right, of a fair trade company is I'm not just selling sweaters, I also have to explain to people what the heck fair trade is, right? A lot of people know that now, but not always, and not everybody that walks into the Works or Duo is looking for local food, right? So, local, I don't know, what would say, local focus or awareness, right? How do you appeal to diversity, right? A diversity in your culture base, in your customer base. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah.
What produce do you feel is most needed from local farmers?
Ah, nice. Excellent, right? What's not there that can be getting developed? Very cool. 1, 2. Yep. Go ahead.
How do you define a living wage?
Okay, good.
Is something that, basically.
Okay, and we have 2 sides to that, right? We have the living wage, and then we have the accessible food. Right, so how do we get that balance? Because we all want to pay our staff the most, robust possible, but at the same time, we have a customer, we want to make our food accessible to customers. How do we balance that? Yeah.
So how do you communicate your limitations to your customer, if at all, when you
for example, can't source something thoughtfully or ethically, but you've based your mission and business on this?
Okay, so what would we say, 100%? Or 50, or mostly, right?
Not, yeah, the language you use, and also how to develop that relationship honestly.
Right, right. So having that idea of transparency, and we're working across seasons. Again, we're working in a transparency. We're working in a highly competitive market because our restaurants next door might not be local, right? So there's choices out there. Yeah.
At what point, and what are your strategies for maintaining competitive edge? And at what point is, hey, we're thoughtfully sourced, we're locally sourced, like no longer the only thing that can carry you? Like having a product and service that people want outside of just the local terroir kind of thing.
So I'm gonna call that kind of like the whole value, right? The whole value for customers. All right, yeah, one more, and then we're gonna let them start. You guys got it. We're gonna be here for another 2 hours.
For a local seasonal restaurant, what are your strategies to overwinter? Like, how do you think about that?
Big root cellar.
Yeah.
Huge.
Value added.
And it was funny because we did a winter CSA once just to see what it was going to be like, and we felt like we were poor Irish potato farmers because all we were eating was turnips and beets and cabbage and celery and strategies to extend the winter, right? Okay, the locavore challenge and getting Vermont wheat, right? And that's very expensive. Making bagels. Right, so, all right, good. So we got a lot of different pieces here. I think what I'm gonna do, instead of kind of putting them together in categories, I think I'm gonna let you guys decide how you're gonna jump in and address them. Does that sound good?
Can I address one just open and honestly? And this happened to us just recently, and it's a good example. So and it's not local, but this is in the 100% in the transparency there. So we buy our chicken, and I won't get into the detail of the chicken story and everything else like that. But our supplier didn't have chicken about 3 weeks ago, and we didn't know about it until like the day that we were wanting to get a delivery into our cafes. And so we went without our chicken, which was humanely raised and has all this thoughtfully sourced things like that, and all we could get was essentially bad chicken. I mean, I don't want to call it beyond, but Tyson chicken or Purdue chicken or someone else's chicken, right? So we had two options. We either said no chicken. Chicken's like the #1 seller of white meat, or we had to put up a sign and say, hey, for these next few days, and we're not really sure how many days this is really going to be, this chicken doesn't meet our standards. And we had to be bold and kind of say that, right? So we did that. We didn't go without chicken. And we were kind of sheepish about it. We didn't know, should this be like a huge sign? Like, hey, we got a chicken issue here, right? So I'm curious to know, with anybody that's been there, really what you think and how big should the sign have been? Or should we have gone without chicken? And what should we have done about the chicken? This is the chicken story. Different than what we talked about yesterday.
No, you're the expert. We want the answer from you.
Well, you guys
No, I'm kidding.
Can I say something? In my previous experience, I used to work for UMass Dining doing procurement for the dining commons, and I would see that as like an educational moment. So instead of just saying, we don't have chicken, can you turn that around and make it a point of education where it's like, we don't have chicken, here's why. We hold ourselves to such high values and we didn't want to compromise them, and these values aren't this, and this is why we hold those values.
The word temporarily.
Yeah.
So in true disclosure, it was a training moment or for ourselves, because we didn't even know what to do internally. And so it was like, what do we do? We hadn't been through it yet. We hadn't been down the no chicken road yet, right? And so and then when you talk about educating staff in the restaurant business, ours, which is slightly different than Duo because they make better money there, really. I shouldn't say that in front of a lot of my
If
staff.
you're going to talk about retention,
300%.
we are probably equal.
Right. The restaurant industry says that you could turn your staff 300% in a year. I mean, it's a lot of training to try to get them. And then you have a chicken story, right? Well, we're just trying to get them to figure out how to make an egg sandwich without someone coming in And I'm just gonna share one other thing and then so in the early 90s, we had a certified organic commissary plant in Keene and we were selling bagels and we thought, oh great, we should sell organic bagels in the stores. And so we started doing that and a customer came in and said, well, what's organic, right? And our staff, we did do a reasonably good job with that, saying, well, it's not treated with pesticides or fertilizers or whatever. And the person, I was there that day, this one interaction, the customer said, all your other bagels have that in there? And we were like, yeah. And it was like an aha moment, like of, what do we know, what don't we know? And we don't know what we don't know, really, on a lot of things. Training's tricky.
So I think that where it's really interesting because we are at such a different scale. So
Right.
dirty receipts, get them all the time. The dirtier the better. That's very normal. The running out of chicken all the time because we're working with such small purveyors. I mean, it's so interesting listening to Richard and I'm thinking, oh, that's so neat how you're scaling it in big and you're looking to work. He and I are approaching very different size farmers and I love hearing it and so very different but going to your question of 100% transparency and the chicken story, you everything on the menu isn't local. And so all you can do, I think there's a trust factor that you build with your customers. So you trust that if I'm charging $12 for a sandwich, it needs to be $12. Mm-hmm. You trust that if it's spring, the asparagus that I'm getting is from a local farmer. And right now I have pea puree on the menu. Peas are not in season yet. They will be. We're stretching it. We're trying to invite the peas in, so that we don't have to do 6 menus in the spring. So, yeah, there is a blind trust.
Does that ever feel like you're...
No, because I'm being honest.
Right, okay.
I'm not saying
yeah,
you should
okay.
trust me and you
Right.
shouldn't trust me. I'm saying trust me.
You've built an equity with your customer base.
Or building, yes.
And you have a hard time doing that because you're disconnected from your employees in such a way that they turn over faster than you probably even know all their names.
Oh, no.
No?
No, I was saying retention is so hard.
No, but then I switched it to, you both are turning over 300%.
Oh, I don't know about 300%. But I'm sympathizing that it, and I can speak about Brattleboro and Denver as 2 very different job.
Denver.
Because I have a restaurant, I have Duo in Denver, and so they have different retention rates.
Right.
In this town, it is so hard to employ people. Everyone should come move. We have tons of jobs, and so the turnover is definitely higher in Brattleboro than it is in Denver. And I was more saying no. I think it doesn't matter if they're making more or less or who knows. We could compare how much they're making, but.
But then how do you then, with that struggle, transmit those points to your customer base? Mm-hmm. Because you're not always there to verbalize this.
I actually don't think I do a very good job.
Oh.
I think it's something that I really super struggle with. So my husband and I go to the works all the time and we kind of drool over the big photography and the big loud signs that say. Meanwhile, on our menu, at the very bottom, it has a list of purveyors that we support. Mm. On our website, it says our partners. People probably think we mean financial partners, what we're talking about. So I actually don't. I'm not the type of person that on the menu you'll see arugula from Fertile Fields Farms, goat cheese from Vermont Creamery, that doesn't excite me. So again, I think I probably lean on the side of trust too much. So much that I'm not capitalizing on what I'm doing.
I agree with Stephanie. I mean, like I said, when I started out, 20 years ago, it was the trust, and nobody had anything on their menus. It wasn't, I can't stand reading menus that list. I don't mind on the bottom of the menu or the back of the menu or somewhere, these are our farm partners. That's great, you should be doing that. But every menu item, it just reads like a book. And you're like, oh my God, you know, really? There has to be some point of trust there, I think. And I remember when people started to put the farms and started to really get descriptive with who was providing what. And I just didn't do it because I didn't think I had to. And then I finally realized, you know, I have to, because then people were starting to question me. Even though I was still doing it and using local farmers, then they said, well, how come, where do you get this arugula, and where do you get this? And I'm like, well, I get it from the same people I've always been getting from, you know, Mora down at the Intervale. It's like, oh, we didn't know that, you know, because they're using so-and-so's, you know, from Arethusa Farm. And it's just like, it was like, okay, wow. Okay, now I have to do it, you know, so.
Don't most people, I mean, I'm talking about the average consumer here, most people have trust that what they're eating is healthy because the USDA says so, right? But that's the problem, it's the trust. We don't want trust, we want knowledge. I want to know what I'm eating, you know? And okay, maybe it's pretentious that it says, you know, this from this from this, but that's what I want as the consumer.
All right, so I'm going to take this into, because I like, David, that you're participating this way, and I know also that Richard had sent this as a question to the entire audience, right? And I know you guys are the ones that are serving the customer. So customers, what do you think about this? This is a really important conversation. It goes into that idea of 100% or mostly, that idea of trust and transparency. Where do you guys feel that you are?
So,
yeah.
What I'd probably do, this is probably more with the works than anything else, but probably set up like a Velcro kind of like dot system where you put on the side like locally sourced, somewhat local, like from somewhere else, you know? And then you can put like all organic and then it be like a different color. And then you just put a little dot with like a little Velcro thing. And like when the chicken runs out, you can put a different dot on there. And it has on the side like that little kind of like chart that lets people know like what exactly are they reading. So that way they're not reading it like a book, but then people are kind of being like, huh, what's that? Why is there a whole bunch of different dots? And it's like the curiosity kind of makes them go towards that next spot, you know? So maybe for like the main board, I wouldn't really say like for individual menus, but just so that way people could kind of get a feel for like, all right, what's local right now? What isn't, you know?
The idea, so we have the education, the transparency, the trust, kind of all in that one visual. It sounds like it's easier to manage. So 1, 2, yep.
I would just say, because I do pay attention to, you know, on a menu where it's, if it says where things come from, and one of my pet peeves is when they'll go to the trouble, they'll say like, you know, we source locally when possible. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, what the hell does that mean?
Transparency.
But you see that a lot.
So, I when I go to the store, I look at my food, definitely. I don't eat out a lot of restaurants, but just sort of a case. I ate last night at a chain type of restaurant, I had a steak and a beer. The steak was awful. The steak was obviously frozen steak, it was like grainy, and I mean, these are steak tips that was supposed to be like really tender and delicious, and it was like, what am I eating? You know, I mean, I wasn't even positive it was beef. and you I wonder how many people really care or even notice that what they're eating, you know? I mean, McDonald's is a pretty big business. I don't know what that is, not really food, but I wonder how many people actually, you know, think like this and say, okay, what am I eating, where is it coming from?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should be mindful, this is a very self-selecting crowd.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you look at Panera, so there's a Panera in Keene, and Panera in general is doing fantastic as a restaurant. And how much are they sourcing locally? And that's sort of the, you know, you want restaurants to be successful and to draw more people into the local movement, not to price them out of it.
I think this all goes back to the first question, is why not? Everything on this board goes back to that question, pretty much, with the exception of maybe 2 things up there. And we just kind of hit it on the head. Everybody in this room is mindful, and they're willing to pay $12 for a sandwich. And I teach about wine now, so it's the same thing. When you look at what sells, it's crap, manufactured poop, right? For lack of a better word. Excuse my language. But you know, and then it's hard to get those people to buy the natural wine that's produced by a family that lives on a hill and the guy's wearing a beret, and they have a dog, because there's always a dog, and they have old barrels and old cellar, right? So that's what you want them to buy, and it's only $5 or $6 more. But the vast majority of people out there, I'm not gonna say they don't care, but it's about style and price.
Yeah.
And when you look at Burlington, this is my first time in Brattleboro, I love it, but when you look at Burlington, it's the same thing. Five Guys is packed all the time. The chain restaurants are packed, the parking lots, right? Everybody else is doing pretty good too, but you think, well, who's eating at these places? We're in Vermont, and we're so much more aware here than we are in the rest of the country, I think. And when you look at that, you say, wow, have you ever been to the Midwest? Do you know what they're eating out there? They're eating those crappy steak dips. I mean, that's it. It's chain restaurant, it's Applebee's, it's Chili's, it's the 99, it's all these places. They don't really have a choice, and it's getting better. But here, it's really hard. And when you're sourcing locally and you're charging extra money, because you have to charge extra money, and you're trying to pay people a livable wage, and then you're trying to provide them with insurance, and you're trying to do all these right things, you almost price yourself out of the market, depending, because there's only a small amount of people that are going to support you, believe it or not. I mean, that's just been my experience. So you do the best thing, and I love the, thoughtfully sourced.
I think
because you can't always get everything here, and you have to be thoughtful about where you're getting it. So it's the next best thing. And if it's not good, then you just don't put it on the menu. If it is crappy chicken, then you shouldn't do it. But if you can source something that's good, not necessarily local, like within 200 or 300 miles, I still think that's okay. But yeah, it all goes back to why. And I just don't think there's the vast majority of people out there.
That's the answer.
They don't want to pay it.
So Joanna and then Jim, I see your hand up, Joanna. I know you wanted to say.
I was just going to kind of bring it to a different lens too. I'm bringing it back to education in a sense. I do a lot of work with like farm institution, K through 12, getting local produce into the mouths of like small children. And there's one school, Chicopee, which is in further down 91 than we are. It's a fairly low income community. The kids they were used to their compressed chicken patties and their really awful low quality food, but they received grant funding and they made this huge effort to get more whole ingredients, better quality food. And so what I'm saying is that over time, the same kids who are maybe in first grade, maybe now they're in fourth grade, have developed a palate and an appreciation for these whole ingredients, these better quality foods. And so it's like, regardless of it being local, their palate now prefers it because they're trained how it's prepared well. That's what they are used to eating. So there's an education aspect behind it as well, an access aspect.
Yeah, very good. Jim and then.
Sort of sticking to the $12 sandwich, and as Kevin was mentioning about, there's just not demand. The other big, sort of on the other side of the table that I sit at in the community development piece is a lot of people complain that downtown Brattleboro is too expensive for them. I mean, we live in a poor community, and it's a huge problem. So luckily the self-selected people in this room can afford the $12 sandwich. But there's a lot of people that either can't afford it or at least feel like they can't afford it. And it's a whole nother piece of this that we haven't even touched on about, it's more expensive and the objections that we get sort of in the, I'm not on the select board, but on the various boards and things like that, is downtown is too expensive. Nobody can go there. And I don't really know what to do about that, but it certainly also plays into this. We haven't even really brought it up yet.
Yeah.
Stephanie seems to have a response.
I want to be clear that I'm not marketing to the masses. So the 99, but that's very important because we try to, sometimes some people have the lens of, are we being inclusive? I'm not being inclusive. If someone wants Thai food, they should not go to Duo. And if someone is a fan of the 99, they're not going to like Duo. And how that plays out, that's trickier for me, that I've realized in moving from a major city to a small town, is that because there are less choices in a small town, there's less self-selecting. In Denver, people will only go to Duo because they want Duo. In Brattleboro, they'll say, oh, well, this place is closed and I've been there 3 times, I guess we'll try Duo. And they're probably not gonna love us because they didn't actually really self-select into us.
But I emphasize one thing, I think it's so important to get back to the education of young people. And you've got to face the reality. There are billions of dollars spent by the fast food industry to get the kids, every show, every one of the kids watching television, they're advertising for the little babies plunked down in front of the TV set just to, without a babysitter or whatever, just looking at a screen. They're seeing McDonald's, cute little things, cartoons, characters, places to play when you go there and such. I mean, that is a huge influence that really has to be addressed, I think, on the governmental side of things in terms of education programs, rules in terms of what they can feed kids in schools. Just unfortunately, I don't think we're going to see much of that in the next 3 years.
Back is getting rolled back.
Parental thing too,
Yeah,
It starts right at home with your family.
Well, you can train the parent, parents are parents, but if they want their kids to live and be healthy and whatever, you got to train them that they're not doing it by taking them to those kind of restaurants.
And I think that piece also with the palate is really important. I just want to bring that back again, because while you were eating your steak tips that you knew weren't good, it sounded like there was many other people that were eating it thinking it was good.
Probably.
And they might not have ever had the experience of knowing what well-prepared food is.
Right.
Or the
Well, it's like a great up from McDonald's.
Right. And also not liking it, right? Because the fresh food is a lot more of a subtle taste, a lot simpler. It doesn't have a lot of those other, high flavored ingredients, right? So really developing a palate, that's something interesting to think about. Yeah.
So, I'm as much in this silo as the rest of us, but Instagram is a very powerful platform. So regardless of what you're doing, you need to be using it on the regular, and you need to be creating a really good story for your brand. And it's about your personal beliefs about what you're doing, and it's free. So do that.
I back that. Excellent advice.
It's not free though,
Because it takes a lot of time to do it.
Yes, but you can do it. You can have your staff do it too.
You can log on to our account.
So the second thing is that I find myself now that I'm kind of venturing into this space, really paying attention to when I go out, why won't I spend $250 more for this thing or that thing or whatever. Why am I actually making decisions? And I'm the worst of the worst when it comes to no, I don't want to spend $5 more for whatever, So I feel like I'm kind of two-headed in that sense. That I want to spend the $12 for the sandwich if I know that Sally gets to go to school in a biodynamic farm school because that's her passion, and that somehow it's really, so I'm studying systems, right? And so basically I'm thinking that if the farm aspect of what, or the value added aspect of what we're talking about, were to actually play on the nodes within that system, so you're actually maybe on the social, media network, or maybe just with your staff and really introducing your farmers or your value-added producers to your staff, so that the nodes that need to connect with each other can do that, because within these systems there are, extremely important, very connected people. So it's just a matter of playing with the system enough and introducing your staff with your customers and your suppliers and all that, and I guess this is kind of a huge ramble, but letting the system do the work for you, basically, and recognizing who's very high connected, regardless of where in the value chain they are for you, and playing on those very highly connected people, and just really getting an awareness for that.
Could I bring up something that we're doing that
sure.
might be interesting? I'd like to hear your feedback. So in Denver, we are about to launch a 2% surcharge on all of our bills for a living wage. And in the restaurant world, anytime you have a minimum wage increase, obviously servers get an increase in their tipped employee minimum wage increase, get an increase. Anytime you have a menu price increase, your servers get an increase. because your bills are higher, and so the percentage is higher. So they've had built-in increases year after year after year after year. And so what happens is the discrepancy between back of the house and front of the house is, in a lot of places, 2.5 times. It is incredibly out of whack and not reflective of anything, talent, education, work, nothing. And so we've been really watching the national landscape of what they're doing about this. And some leaders, Danny Meyer is a hero of mine, and he has moved a lot of his restaurants into just across the board, no tipping, and everybody gets paid one wage. Well, what happens with that is then the servers get an enormous pay cut. But in return, they get consistency, and they know what they can count on. So we're about to try this livable wage, and to our knowledge, the first people in Denver to do it. And what it would do is basically be, instead of doing a menu increase, a line item. But you all are gonna see a livable wage surcharge on there. But if I had done a menu increase, you wouldn't have even noticed. But this is drawing attention because we can't figure out any other way to not give the servers an increase.
So is the 2% only for the servers?
No, for the back
It's
of the house.
for the back of the house. Can I just say something? You know, I mean, there's somebody doing this in Winooski, Waterworks. So, and I just caution you.
We've been talking to
I
others,
caution
but not
you.
him.
So, yeah, you can just give him a call,
That'd be great.
David Abdu. You really, really need to let people know.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
you have to like have table tents
Yeah.
out or do whatever you have to
Yeah.
do, because there are some people that were very upset when they did this. Some people were very happy, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
You're giving a raise, but some people would just, I mean, it was like, he'd be better to tell you, but I mean, I heard from people that, oh, I don't like what they're doing out there. You know, why don't they just raise the menu prices 50 cents? And like you said, the
It's so scary.
discrepancy keeps going up. So yeah, they put a 2% surcharge on that's going just to the kitchen as like an end of month bonus. Is what they get.
Danny Myers, you know, it literally gives you with the bill, do not tip.
Mhm.
Do not tip.
But people are still going to tip.
Yeah.
At Duo, and they still tip at Waterworks.
No, they have to tip.
They're gonna tip.
It's just a surcharge for the back of the house.
It's a
But I'm
surcharge.
just saying, Danny Myers
I
charges
know.
it.
Yeah.
It says, do not tip.
Yeah.
And everything evened it out. I talked to some of their staff not too long ago, and they're sort of with it because it's now proven to be a good idea. Unfortunately, you know, Danny Myers prices, but what do you call it? There's no complaints from any customer. I mean, you know, just sit there waiting for somebody to say that, or to add a tip or something, and they'll even return it to you and say, excuse me, is a charge account here? Please, we'd like to recharge because you put a tip on here.
Aren't there federal taxes that they take out on wages because of that?
Yeah, it'll go to them and they'll have to claim it as a tip.
Yeah.
And you get taxed on your tips. The back of the house.
It's illegal for back of the house to accept tips.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
State or
Federal. Federal. It's illegal for them to share in the tips. That's why you have to do it as a surcharge.
I thought there was some.
Illegal to
reference
tip
where the
pool.
wage-
It's illegal to tip pool. Yeah. So
It's
they.
not illegal to.
No, you can do a surcharge and then pay them, but it's illegal for them to accept gratuities
As a tip.
from a server as part of a tip pool.
Because they're not being taxed on it.
No, they'll be taxed on it. They just,
On the
it's
tips?
not in their job description because they're already. We were audited by the federal government. Yeah, it sucked, and it really sucks. But I had to write a check for like $15 because I talked about this morning. I'm a very type A personality when it comes to everything. So I was on top of it. But he said, you know, I asked him about this because I know restaurants that are tip pooling and they're paying the back of the house. I know the owners, I know they're doing it. And he said, no way, don't get caught doing
Does that
that.
include dishwashers?
Everybody. Yeah, and it's a way.
Because they have a higher minimum wage? Is that why the?
It's because they're not
classified.
They're not classified as a tipped employee. And if it's the same thing with managers. You cannot pay a manager cannot participate in a tip pool. And here was the other thing, we owned a wine bar as well. And I said, okay, I work the bar, my wife works the bar. We work the bar with another person, bartender. We're the owners. He said, you can't take any tips.
Whoa.
Yeah, it sucks, right? So you work so hard all night, and at the end of the night, there's $300 or $400 there, and it's like, here you go, babe. Yeah,
That's why Joe
really sucks, right? Because I'm like, we let him go because we were not making enough money to, we were counting on that tipped money. So we had to lay him off, so we cut back on his hours, and then he found he's doing okay, he found another job. But yeah, you cannot do that.
Wow.
Because as an owner or a manager, no, you can't. You're not classified.
So what was the reaction of people if they saw a livable wage surcharge on their bill?
I'd be more likely to continue to go there.
Yeah.
But I'm really educated in that way. I don't know what the whole world would do.
Yeah.
I think that's I feel badly for restaurant people that we're putting all the responsibility on you to educate us, right? And meanwhile,
Right.
I'm the one coming to you for a service. Anyway, so I would need to know, I would be super into it, but I can imagine the freak out about it. What is this? What is this, a separate tax? Is this from the city? Is it from the, And I don't know how you could succinctly explain it. So that's yet another.
Maybe
You're making the invoice very complicated too for people.
put the 2%.
Well, yeah, you see the price, and then you
Yeah.
see city tax, state tax. I mean, on a bottle of wine, you're paying 12% in Burlington. 12% in Burlington, right? Because there's 2% city tax.
It's hard to
and,
read all those.
And 10%. And then all of a sudden, down below, you have a 2%
Right.
surcharge. And then you should call him up and just ask him how he dealt with it.
Could you just put a 2% on like the charge of the food rather than
A menu increase?
Yeah, exactly.
No, because then the servers get
Then they get-
a wage increase, and we're trying to even it.
Shrink the
And the
gap.
thing that crushes me is that most people tip post-tax, when really you're supposed to tip pre-tax.
There's
Well,
no
so,
rule on that, is there?
yeah, you
There's
you
no
don't
rules.
tip on a
There's no rule, you can do
tax.
whatever you want, but when you're
That's
paying
the
12% on
standard.
alcohol,
It's absolutely the
then
standard.
you tip,
that
yeah,
you-
most people
I think
tip on
that's
tax.
a really important thing.
But wait a second, so if it goes subtotal, goes tax, and then it goes surcharge, then it goes grand total. Yet again, the servers are gonna get an
Yeah.
increase.
Right.
Even though we're
You're
trying
right.
so hard. We're putting table tents, we're putting on the menu. We did an hour-long all-staff meeting yesterday talking about the verbiage, talking about how the education, and it'll probably still result in.
The other concern I have is that we're all getting sick of airline fees.
Yes.
There's fees upon fees upon fees.
I know.
What's your expectations when you come in and all of a sudden you see these, the whole fee thing is just ticking people off.
Yeah,
I know.
as a chef, I would love, and I'm not a chef anymore, maybe, one of the reasons, but, because I saw the wait staff come, I know, I wrote their checks. I mean, the wait staff were making a lot of money per hour, right? But they're not working they're only working like 26 to 30 hours a week. Whereas my dishwasher is busting his butt, and it's a really crappy job, right? I mean, I did it hundreds of nights, right, when they quit or didn't show up. So you do it, and it's a really bad job. And when you see the wait staff come in and this only happened like twice, they talk about how much money they make in front of these people who are making $11 an hour or $12 an hour, which is high.
Yeah.
Most of them are, well, now minimum wage is $10, but it's hard. You want to shrink that gap, but that's a generational cultural change. Is going with it, and Danny Myers is very successful with it, but many more restaurants that have tried it in the past year, doing away with tipping and putting a 20% surcharge on, so it's just one price. Here's your price, no fees, nothing. They're all going back to tipping because they lost a lot of staff.
Not all.
Not all of them.
There
but-
are lots
but
of success stories.
There are success stories, but there are also many restaurants that are going back to
Yes.
tipping because various reasons, but one reason is they lose a lot of good wait staff because the guys down the street aren't doing it. So until everybody does it, it's gonna take a really long time to get rid of tipping in this country.
What I want to recognize now, and these are really great conversations, and I would love us to keep talking and talking and talking, but it is 5:15, and I know other people have other things to do. We kind of promised we'd finish by now. But what I want to do is just real quick thank the panelists for being here. Give you a moment just to say one more thing. I think we've addressed a lot of the different questions that are on here. Maybe we didn't look at how we vet the vendors so much, but we talked about education, local value strategies, but you guys should just each share like a little closing message but with the audience, and then we'll.
I'll share one, carrots and onions.
Okay, perfect.
Carrots and onions, all right?
There's
they-
actually
They last long and,
down in Putney. There's Howard Prusak, I believe is his name.
Yeah.
Oh, right,
He has
yeah.
onions.
Yeah, he
Yes,
does
so,
it,
great.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, I'll
Deep
okay.
Meadow or.
I'm just gonna get on my value-added soapbox again as a great solution to shelf life extension and year-round procurement of local food. Yeah, honestly, that's my plug.
I would just say, I always appreciate being re-engaged that it is my job to educate and that I need to push constantly to put myself out there.
Yeah, I said a lot the past few minutes, and whenever I've been out of the business now for a year and a half, and when I talk about it, I start to miss it. And then when I have conversations like this, I'm like, man, I'm glad I'm not in there anymore. Because it's a really, really, really hard business, and people think, well, this place is doing well, and they're packed, and they're charging money, and they're doing all the local things, but really the bottom line is really, really small.
Yeah.
And the harder you try to pay those livable wages, which are coming, they're on the way, and you're gonna be paying a dishwasher $15 or $16 an hour. Prices are gonna rise, and it's gonna be really interesting to see the landscape, how it all unfolds over the next 5 to 10 years. And I'll be teaching wine classes.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time.